name is Anna Grace, and you are watching GraceArtistry. Today I'm going to be working on this painting, particularly this little ship right here. I'm going to show you a few techniques, and one of those is blending. I'll be blending with certain brushes that I use. This is one of them. It's a diamond brush, and I usually just go right over top of the painting like that. I try to just really use a lot of layers and a lot of blending in my paintings. I like to have a few edges, just like some really sharp spots in certain places. Enjoy! Alright, so I am going to be blending on this surface. This is just a scrap piece of cardboard thing. Hopefully this works. I've got this big brush here. This is from Home Depot. It's a diamond brush. I have a spray bottle, which I definitely need, and just a frayed out old brush. I'm going to be using some white paint, and we'll see what we can create here. Just want to create some nice, smooth blending. I've also got a rag, a palette, and a jar of water. Alright, here we go. I don't want the paint to be too thick. And I want the surface to be wet. You can also do this with a dry surface, but I think it spreads a little bit better when it's wet. Now I'm going to try to make the middle lighter than the outside. And I want to, in this demo, just eliminate my brush strokes. So I'm just thinning the paint out around the outside. Looks kind of like a brown sky and a sun or something. You kind of have to practice with seeing how much water you need. Because if you have too much, it's just going to start running. But if you have too little, it's not going to spread and it's going to dry out. So I'm not afraid to go over the middle, even though I want it to stay bright. And you kind of just work at it. I'm holding my brush close to the end of it, close to the bristles. And I don't want there to be any dust or clumpy paint or anything like that in the brush, or else that's going to leave marks and it's going to take paint away. All right. Now, I don't want to go over top of this again before it's dry, completely dry, or else I'm just going to take off more paint by accident. It's at a point right now where I want to let it dry, and then I'm going to see what it looks like after that and add some more blending. So it's always handy to just have a blow dryer with you. When it's halfway through drying, you're going to get a little bit worried because you can see some little bits are dry and some are still wet, so it's going to look really patchy. But don't stop and panic, just keep blow drying, let it completely dry, and then see what it looks like. Alright, I'm going to kind of do that again and blend a little bit more. So I'll do the process again, but this time on a completely dry surface. So So I put the paint on first and then added the water. Let's make kind of a shape here. You don't need too much paint. It's really wet, it's coming out nice and easily. And see, I'm not always going in one direction. If I do that, then I'll be dragging the paint down here and have particular brush strokes. And I'm just kind of pulling the edges out. And if you want to do a little bit of detail, like if I had an eye in there or something, you can just take your rag and pull the paint off. I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to turn this into something. Just going to keep doing that same concept, same technique, until it becomes something. Now this time I don't want to spread it out too much, just a little bit. I usually find that I don't have enough hands when I'm painting. I want to hold my palette and my spray brush, spray bottle, and my rag. Just settle for 2 at a time. Now, if you don't want to always be picking up your blow dryer, you can just let that part dry and move on to a different place, and then come back to it. For me, this is only part of my techniques. I like to do a lot of straight edges as well. But I do love the look of blending and making things look soft. So sometimes I do start out my paintings like this, and then I just refine it a bit more as it develops. Now this brush must be dry. That's part of this technique. If this was sopping wet, this would not work at all. And this is still wet down here, so it's kind of being pulled. So you have to be careful with that. One nice thing about acrylics though is that they do dry very fast and quite solidly really fast. If I was using watercolors, a lot of this stuff in the back would be spreading out. And I wouldn't be able to put white on top, so it'd be a completely different experience. I like to paint often with just white paint and then add the colors later. Just so that I don't have to think about mixing color and adding value at the same time. I can just do one of them, and then I'll go over top of it with washes of color. But that technique takes a lot of time, and it's not very practical if you're like plein air painting or on site, because you really have to wait till everything dries first. I took my painting to a friend's the other day, and I asked her to point out anything that she thought was out of place or could be better. And so one of the things that she talked about was this little ship right here. that it kind of looked a little bit flattened, like it was on top of the, or like with the ear instead of standing out from it. So I think I'm going to try to make it lighter. So I'm just mixing some water with titanium white, and I'm going to do a very thin wash of white over top of what I have already to try to brighten this up. I want to see some of the detail underneath, so I'm going to see if I can keep that wet and then feather it out once I'm done filling it in. If I was working on a smaller piece, I would just pick it up and turn it over, but because this one is so big, I'm just going to try to make a full circle without moving the whole piece. Alright. It's still wet, and I want to try to get rid of what I put down now a little bit. Not going to worry too much about the lines, I'm just going to wipe them away. You always have to keep a rag with you. I'm using just really soft brushes to do the blending. These ones are Diamond brand. Just got them at Home Depot. So you can see how it's starting to glow a little bit now. And hopefully that's going to bring it out just a touch. And I can go in there and add more darks around here if I need to. Now, once it starts to dry, if it's too wet and too watery, it makes all these little pools in there. So I just keep feathering it out like this until it's a little bit drier, and then it won't leave those textures anymore. And I can speed up the process by now I'll go in there and add some more detail so that it doesn't just look like it's fading away. But I gotta do that once it's completely dry. So, I don't like to waste paint, so while I have this white on my brush, I'm just gonna go in here and add some more smoke or fog or whatever this is. Kind of the same process on a bigger scale. I want this to be a little bit see-through. I don't always like seeing brush strokes and everything, so I'm going to try to get rid of those as much as possible, especially for something like this that I want to look natural and transparent. again, just brushing this until it's pretty dry and no longer leaves those little pools and textures. Could be a cool technique for a different area though, leaving all that. If the brush is not super clean or new, then it might leave little streaks in there as well. So you have to like clean it out a little bit. And it also has to be completely dry for this to work. Barely skimming the top with the end of the brush. There we go. This is why I like acrylics. They do dry super fast. It's not super dry yet, so I just smudged it a little bit. That's alright. It's always really important to stand back from your painting as often as you can so that you can see the detail that you just did. When you're right up close, you can't really tell the effect that it has on the whole painting. So I want this to be a little bit brighter. So I'm just going to do that same thing again. Now if it hasn't set yet, if it's not completely dry, I might disturb some of the paint underneath that I just put down and could get some funky textures. But I'm gonna risk it. You can also use zinc white for this, which is a very transparent white, but I find that it takes a long time to make it actually look like anything. I try to be so careful and then kind of give up. Trying to use a clean part of the towel every time I touch the canvas because I don't want to get paint where I don't want it. And I'm just pulling in from the sides instead of going out like this because I don't want to make all that mess again. And for this little thing, it works well to have the middle, the brighter spot. If I was working on something else, though, I might change the way that I'm using my brush strokes. if you use a hotter setting on your blow dryer, then it will dry it a lot faster than if you use a cold one. And when you're washing up with acrylics, you should use cold water or else it'll clog your sinks because it's going to dry a lot faster, which is something that the bottles do not tell you. They say to use hot water. I'm just spreading it super, super thin to make that foggy look. These are some kind of like steam stacks or something. If you're not sure if something's dry, you can just put your head down so that the light's in the right spot to see if it's shiny or not. It looks a little bit crazy, but it works. Artists should look a little bit crazy sometimes, I think. Again, not wasting paint, just using it up where I think extra highlights could be beneficial. I have a smaller version of that same idea. These are just brushes that I've used a lot. They're all beat up and frayed out, and they work really well for blending. I'm going to go over that top of that spot that I put the highlight on last time. Try to brighten it up a little bit more. Greater contrasts in the foreground. That'll make it look like it's closer to us. So I've got this really dark down here and then these really bright here. But that can be tricky because I don't want people to look there necessarily. So I have to find a good balance between making it look close and making it look important. Red was my first color out of the primary colors that I ran out of, which was surprising because I usually use a lot of blue, but I guess you need to use more red maybe to make it stand out. I don't know. I don't really use a lot of yellows, so I guess it makes sense. I just use the primaries, red, yellow, and blue for all of my paintings, but I find that I can get to where I want a lot easier that way, because I know exactly which combinations I need to make the colors that I want. Just kind of simplifies it for me. So I've got magenta, cadmium yellow, and phthalo blue. As you can see, I build a lot of layers. I think layers are fun because you don't have to commit right away. You can be like, oh, that looks cool for now. See if I want to change it later. And you can kind of build it up. I do a lot of putting on and taking off as well. Probably waste a lot of hours. That's all right. That's how you learn. That's how I learn. Right now I'm working with GraceArtistry acrylic and Liquitex Professional. Because like I said, I ran out of red, so I went and got a different brand. The Chroma one I've only found in Vancouver. But I think their store isn't even around anymore. They probably sell online. But I like getting professional acrylics because they're just so rich and they look great. And I only buy paint that doesn't have any white added, so it's all transparent, unless I'm actually buying white, of course. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I would love to come and show you a few more of my techniques. Please leave a comment and subscribe, press that like button, and I'll see you again soon.